I suppose how I got involved is also, I suppose a lot about how the company I work for and I own. Sorry, it's strange even saying that. It's been 3.5 years, but it's I've worked here for 18 years. But so it's a similarity really that we were talking earlier and chatting on the odd conversation that people will say to me all the time, well, what's so different about a data center roof? And as I said, it happens to be on a data center. I mean, how did we get into this sector? I think you need to go all the way back to the 1990s. And it probably starts off a conversation of other things we might talk about later. But, we go back to the 1990s and we think, right, the company I'm involved in, started in 79. It was part of a group of companies that were basically refurbishing existing buildings. And this wave of construction and opportunity came in the mid 1990s, which it was tech and life science influx into the Irish market. And it was American capital, American money coming to the Irish market. There was a trade deal done between the US and Ireland. There was a huge amount put on that kind of foreign direct investment into Ireland. And they started constructing very large, what were, I suppose, the European headquarters for a lot of these companies. The Dells, the Intels, the Xerox, these type of companies. And Moy got involved as the market leader and one of the only companies really involved in kind of roofing to the specification and high end at that time in the 1990s. Moy got involved in it and started building an expertise around that, I suppose, what we still call today critical infrastructure. I mean, if we're being honest, they liked them because they were big boxes and they were generally single story and they had roofs the size of football pitches or multiple football pitches, so equal revenue. So that was the initial in. That then moved in the early noughties into the data center sector, and we don't even say the data center sector. Like today, you look at it as a sector, right? Then it was a few buildings, right? But there was opportunity. So we did the first number, a good few of the first number of data centers in Ireland, but it really, I suppose, became a thing for us probably around 2013, 2014. We had, funny enough, I had moved to London in 2010 for the business to set up our UK business. And we were finding it hard. It was real tough. We weren't chasing data centres, just general construction, because Moy have been involved in all sorts of construction for many years. A hyperscale client, which we'd worked with in Ireland, started working in the Netherlands. And we got specified, we got an opportunity to work with them there. And it was at that point I went back to the old managing director and said, hey, Pat, look, I think we should look at this market. I think we should, we've literally spent 4 years trying to build up a business in the United Kingdom on general construction. And we've done 1 year's turnover on one project. And from talking to the guys and girls involved in the site, they're saying there's a lot more of these coming over the next few years. So we really need to look at, and we are roofing people who happen to do data centers. So how do we become data center people who happen to do roofing? And that was an ideology I had. I probably heard someone else say something like it and I borrowed bits of it and mashed it all together because that's what I tend to do. But yeah, I felt that was something, it was an opportunity there for us as a business. At the time, I wasn't a director, I wasn't an owner, I was a sales guy, know, and I managed about 3 or 4 sales guys in the UK at that stage, and then I really started focusing on this. And it's that piece where it pollinated. It was cross-pollination. It was, so the engineer on that project was then working on another project down by Amsterdam. Do you want to come along? Do you want to work on this one with us? And then a few of those guys were working on projects over in Denmark, and we'd like to get you involved. And, then there was an architect, and they, before you knew it, you were, from 2013 working on one project, and we were working on about 6 countries by 2018, sorry. And then it just started going from there, and I suppose, to the level that we're at now, COVID hit and, everybody sprung back out of their boxes, and it's like, wow, look at where we are, so much had changed even in that small period. And we just, we put a magnifying glass on this sector. Why? Because it's a busy sector. It's in the construction industry. the people that we're working with, the clients that we're working with, put value in what we do. I think a lot of people in this sector will say a lot of the time, look, we are not the cheapest at what we do. I mean, if we go in and the first conversation someone asks me is like, okay, how much are you? I'm like, okay, let's talk a bit more around that first. It's more, what are you getting before we get onto that? And I think this sector values that. It values technical input, early stage input. We want to be involved in the job 3-4 years before you're building, because we want it. So everything that, a Me Too sale is not. So I think we really landed on our feet within this sector. It suited how we worked, and this sector, we were suited to the sector. And, if we look only at in the last 3.5 years since we purchased the company, myself and my business partner, Brian, I had been focusing on it for a decade, so it's no surprise. But we got to a point where, we have doubled our turnover in the last 4 years or so. But most of the growth has come from this sector.
Wow.
When we were half the size we are now, about 15% of our turnover was from data centers. Now we're double the size. Over 50% of our turnover is now from data centers, about 55%.
Wow.
And it's, we were talking earlier as well. For me, it started out as, tech industry, life science industry. We still have life science business, in fairness, it's good to us. But we then looked at the mission critical environment and data center sector. We then started thinking about that more as general critical infrastructure. But for me, it's the digital infrastructure, because it's going to keep, that digital economy is only going to go one way.
Right.
And I feel like we're very deeply engrossed in that, and very proud to be fair. Really, really proud to be involved in that sector.
Yeah. When you were, I still catch myself saying digital economy all the time, and somebody the other day said, it's just the economy now. Like, what economy is not the digital economy? And I thought about that for a second. I was like, they're right, because we used to have to specify it's the digital economy.
Yeah.
And now it's just the economy. Like, there's very little economy that is not in some way have connectivity and data and whatever.
True.
There's very little technology. You may make forklifts, but what you actually do is make technology that you employ into your forklift with all the big data and all the other things.
Yeah.
And but how did you get connected to Moy? Like, were you sitting around being your football pitch star there in Dublin City, Ireland, or whatever? What led you to even get involved in this sector?
So even in the construction sector, wow. We go back, I suppose. I definitely don't think I was, when I was a young guy, I went, hey, I want to do this. I want to work in the construction sector. I think I've heard you and Kirk have this same conversation about the data center sector, and, other guys within our sector, within our industry, having these conversations. It was my second job in construction. I had one previous to it, but, I suppose I entered the sales world. I didn't enter the construction world psychologically. I suppose, I worked. That's the best way to describe it. I started working at the age of 12, collecting glasses in a local pub to make some money. I then went behind the bar at about 15 years of age. I worked pretty much full time through the end of what we would classify as high school. And I worked and I worked and I worked, and I liked working. I loved working and I liked sport. One of the reasons I liked working in the bar so much was it never felt like work. Every night in work, okay, you had to clean the toilets at the end of the night, you had to clean down the glasses, etc. That bit wasn't so nice, but generally it felt like a night out every night. And you're meeting people, you're interacting with humans. I just always loved chatting, talking, learning, listening. Some would say maybe not as much listening as I just said there, but and I'm on a podcast doing all the talking. So, so I always loved working, and I was working in the bar game, and at about 23 years of age, a guy approached me in the bar I was working in, and said, "Look, God, what are you doing here? Is this it? Is this life? Is this?" And I said, "Look, well, I don't know what else. I hadn't got much of an education. I mean, I did okay, but found out in later years that, look, I'm dyslexic. I found out in the last 12 months I have ADHD. not that I need those labels, but they've helped me understand a lot of why I struggled with the general education system and the way it was, especially in the 80s and 90s. So I suppose a lot of the stuff that was left with me from school, you can't write, you're stupid, just leave education to other people who are clever, like your brother, stuff like that. That kind of sticks with you, unfortunately, for a while.
Yeah.
So, when the guy asked me that question, my answer was, no, I don't have an education, so what am I going to do? And he just looked at me and he said, sell.
Right.
You're going to go into sales. I said, what will I sell? And he said, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Look at you here in the bar. You're managing people's expectations. You are dealing with conflict scenarios all day, every day. And you will absolutely fly it, and you'll get in and you'll build a career. So that's how I got into sales. How I got into Moy was I was done with the first job. I was looking for something that maybe had a bit more of a challenge. A friend of mine who is now involved in the data center sector, actually he's a principal architect for one of the larger architectural firms in the data center sector. He said to me many years ago, he said, look, get into the specification technical side of sales because there'll be opportunities to grow. If you have technical knowledge to offer as a business and as an individual, then there'll be value upon what you have. So I applied for a couple of jobs, and one was with a company called Kone Lifts, and one was with a company called Moy Materials at the time. And I got the job in Moy. I actually got offered both, and I still couldn't tell you to this day why I chose roofs over lifts. I don't know.
Right.
But I'm glad I did.
Do you think it was the personal connection with who you were talking to? Was it that obvious, or just
I think
fate intervened? And
I think the previous company I'd worked for was a company in the construction industry. It was a company called ITW and Illinois Toolworks, and it was their CP, their construction products division, and they were a massive global multinational, and there was a lot of cool things about that, but there was, you were very far away from the action. And I think, now that you say it, I think for me, Moy Materials at the time, it was a small company, and you'd get to interact with the managing director, the owners, the senior people, because it was, I think I was employee number 17, so, you were going to be involved with everybody. So I think that was probably that homely feel. And I got that from the interviews, and I got that feeling that it was going to be like that. And it was, to be fair, so, yeah.
Do you think there's something about, not to be, I'm just curious, not to be a psychologist in this, but just something in that, I've met several people, I guess a better way to say it, that have chosen to work with organizations where they really felt like they could be visible and valuable. Like they could be part of whatever the sausage making was. And they may not even have known it when they went through the interview process, but they just felt like they were part of the, I don't mean to cliche, but like part of the family, part of the thing. Not that the organizations that they weren't participating weren't interesting and incredible, but just that fit their soul a little bit better.
I think you're bang on. Like I think as I've got older, I've definitely seen that in general. Like, we make our decisions. We think we know why we're making them, but there's something deeper going on there. And I think for me, I spent a lot of my childhood trying to fit in. And I think Moy was one of those places and it took me a few years to properly fit in, but because, different things that happened in my own personal life in the background. But, I think I saw something, like when you meet your wife and, you can visualize it. You can see this going somewhere. She's not your wife at the time or, or husband, whoever people are with, but there's a deeper connection.
Yeah.
And I think, for me with Moy, there was, and it's funny, it's my relationship with Moy has definitely felt a bit like a love affair over the years. It's been up and it's been down and it's been high and it's been low, and I nearly messed it up on a couple of occasions. See, you said to me earlier it's a corporate podcast. I was going to use a different word there, but I nearly messed it up a couple of times. But thankfully I didn't. But I think you're right. I think I'm fairly deep with stuff like that as well. That human connectivity piece and that feeling a part of something.
Yeah.
I think as well. Just that other important piece, though, isn't it? That you're connected, and it is like a family piece. But you got to remember, and I think this is one of my biggest learnings in business, is that it's not a family,
right?
And you have to remember that it can have that familiar feel, but it's business,
and it's
work, and it's and I think that was I've seen that in our journey as a company, us growing as a business as well, because that's a hard transition, that professionalization of an organization.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That professionalization of an organization. So it's but yeah, I hope that answers the question. Sorry.
It does. I love that. We have to be able to maintain these two things. These corporations aren't alive. So it's just like our pets. Like we project human feeling and emotion on animals because we love them and they reflect it and all these other things. And the same thing with an organization. You can love the culture. I love the culture of my organization. It is a business.
Yeah.
And if you think about it just from the business perspective, it's sort of psychotic. Like it's all about it. It's got to have, these certain parameters. It's got to do these things. And it helps, if done right, it helps human flourishing and whatever. And when done wrong, it kind of goes off the rails. Where I found works well for me is if I compare a business to another business, it compares really well. If I try to compare that business like family, to my family, that's where it can, when it feels like it's disappointing, but it's making business decisions, not family decisions. And that's more art than science, but it's an easy trap. Even I've been doing this for a long time, employee 32 here at this organization. And we've been around for over 20 years. I love it. I love what we're for, but it is a business and we got to do our business.
Yeah. First and foremost, we have to.
Yeah. So are you from Dublin, Ireland originally?
Yeah, I am. I was born in Dublin, moved out of Dublin for about 7 or 8 years. Our family, when we were kids, moved back to Dublin again. Spent most of my life in Dublin until my kind of 20s, and then travelled around a little bit. Moved over to Scotland, worked in a bar over there for a while, and then in 2010 lived in London to set up my UK, the business that the UK business that. But yeah, I'm from Ireland. My family, I suppose. Donegal and Scotland is my two major ancestries. So 4 grandparents, one from Glasgow, 2 from Donegal, and 1 from inner city Dublin. So,
oh wow,
inner city Glasgow, inner city Dublin. So 2 fairly areas that the Europeans would know. Sheriff Street in Dublin, inner city Dublin, and the Gorbals in Glasgow. So 2 quite,
quintessential Scotch and Irish.
Yeah,
you come by their bona fides. Like you got them for real. So we say in the States all the time, the Scots-Irish, and that sounds like literally the Scots-Irish.
That's literally what I am, And even my family, my grandparents who were from Donegal actually moved to Scotland. They lived because there's big connections with the northern part of Ireland and the northern counties and Scotland. So they moved over to Scotland. They ran a sweet shop in Glasgow for many a year. So I literally am genuinely Scots-Irish, or Irish Scots, whatever you want to call it.
Why do you think, I'm going to pivot for a second. We met through this industry, and if somebody had said to me, of all the places on earth, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, that are some of the leaders in accepting big technology organizations, now we would say data center organizations, and being pioneers in servicing those industries, why Ireland of all places? No disrespect to the Irish, but as you said, it's a beautiful but modest-sized island with not a giant population. Probably the entire island's population would fit in the state of Georgia or, one of our other states in terms of number of people. And yet it's had this larger-than-life influence on some of the most important technologies and technological trends of the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, it definitely has. Look, I think obviously it goes back. A lot of it goes back initially to the first wave of American capital coming to Ireland. The likes of, we mentioned them earlier. The first adopters, the early end clients, I suppose, the IBMs, the Intels, the Dells, these kind of guys. When they came over first,
when was that? What era?
Mid 1990s.
Okay.
Early 1990s, actually 92, 93, 94. So they were coming over, headquartering in Ireland, their European headquarters in Ireland. And look, why was that? Tax breaks was, low corporation tax and trade deals was a huge part of it. The Irish did a very good job of, in business terms. I mean, I say the Irish, I definitely can't take responsibility for this. I was about 10 or 11 years of age. But of, encouraging foreign direct investment into Ireland, and people come into Ireland to set up their business, and a very welcoming nation. And there's lots of other, reasons, but that was one of the first reasons. And then we look at, a decade of experience in that before even the first spade was put in the ground to build the first data centers in the early noughties. And I know there'll be people who are, I suppose, absolute experts and historians of data centers will say, hold on, Carl, in 1979 there was actually a data center which was, there was a server in a shed or in a cupboard somewhere. But I'm talking about purpose-built data centers, right? So as a nation we developed expertise then. I think the other piece is that around that time, there was no, there wasn't automotives being built in Ireland. There wasn't a coal industry. There wasn't an oil industry. So the industry was people. I mean, we had farming. That was what we had originally. I mean, so when a lot of these technology companies started setting up in Ireland, I think a lot of we've been known, we have a very good education system. So the education system started directing people towards technology and life science, if I look at the generation, people probably about 5, like my own brother, about 5 years older than me, his wife 5, that sort of number, older than me, they were but brought down the avenue of those sort of education systems, because that's the way they saw the country going. And then, if those industries needed to build somewhere, and we had the workforce because we were keep churning them through the universities, then the expertise and the skill sets were there. So by the time we got to 2012, 2013, and the American multinational clients started building outside of just the Irish cluster and the Dublin and London and those sort of regions, started building around in other locations, the Irish already had the expertise. There was a lot of expertise built up in Ireland in that kind of critical infrastructure, critical mass, and highly technical buildings, and the requirements of the client to design and build through the English language, across numerous different countries and across different codes of compliance. There was an expertise there already. So I think, and I suppose the other side of it is, if you got to remember, when that was happening, Ireland had just hit recession in 2008. In The Big Short, I mean, we're not the only people. And, there's somebody else who we both know the same and say, hey, you don't own that. You don't own monopoly on that. And I don't claim we do. But but we needed to spread our wings. We needed to go somewhere. And so I think it was very opportune that around that time, there was a lot of Irish companies who had been big, who had been hurt by the Celtic Tiger, or the death thereof. So the moment in time when this digital infrastructure or data center industry was kicking off in mainland Europe was a time that we were all like, oh, hold on, we can earn again, we can build up businesses again. And we started, branching out as a nation. Ireland Inc. It's quite fondly known, and so I think there's a lot of different things there, and you got to, how do I say this right? The Irish in general, we work. We're not scared to work, and we want things to work, and we'll find the methodology, we'll find a way, and we don't generally say no to people who want to make things work. If someone wants to put enough money down on the table, we'll find a way to make it work. And I think we've that can do, will do attitude. There's a lot of people that will say, the Irish built the roadways of America.
That's true.
So it's similar concept.
That's true. One of the phrases that we say around here regularly is, we do hard things. And what we mean by that is, a lot of our customers, if the market was easier to predict, if they had the ability, not intellectual ability, but just all, everything coming together at the same time while they were doing their business to just do it themselves, they would do it themselves. But because of speed and scale and a variety of things, they don't come to us for the easy things. They come to us for the hard things. And there's probably a lot of Irish in us because we just go do hard things. We try to do it with excellence and with maturity, operational maturity, and these other things. But we know we're signing up for hard things, not easy things.
Yeah, and I think that's that unique identifier, right? And if you find your niche or your home within doing those hard things, you will create a business opportunity for yourself. And I think for us, they're the fun things, right? That, solving the problem that everyone can solve. As a kid, looking at a Rubik's Cube, that's the one you want to do because it's difficult and not everybody can do it.
Right.
And I think that, and then you will obviously get invited back to help people solve other complexities and problems and difficulties. So, yeah, for me, it's where I like us to live. And I'm glad the Irish have to. And look, there's a lot more than the Irish in this sector. There's a lot of other nations, a lot of other people who but I think we probably stand out because, it's a small nation and it's like, wow, how have we done so much? And when we go to so many countries around Europe, and even you come here, I have a lot of friends. You and I were both at a conference recently in Warm Shores.
Yeah.
And, not just the Irish that travel, but the Irish that are based in the US but are heavily involved in this sector. I'd love to see a heat map on the percentage that makes up. It's especially at senior roles. I mean, it's quite impressive.
Well, I guarantee you it's not going to be accurate, and here's why. I could talk to somebody named Ari Zimmerman, and they are going to find a way to have Irish in them. I don't know why. It's either, if it's not the Scottish, it's the Irish. There's somehow, we went to the Highland Games here in in this area, and they set up this big booth where they've got well over 100 different clans. And it's so funny because those clan leaders, I don't care what your name is, they're going to find a way to connect you to the Campbells, to the Murphys, to the whoever, some way. And but what a remarkable story that, people talk about luck all the time. You've heard it said where opportunity meets preparedness, however you want to phrase it. But that a group of people said, there's an opportunity here for us. And you recognize an opportunity and you take advantage of it. Even if it was pretty organic in beginning, like it's, we're making it sound like it was some big, well-planned and, people were drawing up on whiteboards, but probably just organically through the tax breaks or whatever, it began to happen. And once people saw it starting to happen, whether it started off in the small way with the school system and then got larger and larger, and as people told each other, hey, there's a real opportunity here. To take action is uncommon within a community, much less a country.
Yeah, I think the key word here is agility, right? So we got to remember, you're talking about speed and scale. So when Ireland started in the technology industry, or those companies started coming to Ireland, it was just piecemeal, bit by bit, and it was organic. But also the technology industry didn't know what it was going to do next either, and it still never does. It never knows what it's going to do. It knows eventually, but it's because it's the next thing. The next big thing isn't the next big thing till it's found.
Right.
So I think our ability to continually be agile, and I think that's what created that opportunity in Ireland first, and then outside. And I think, and it's what. Take the Irish piece out of it. When we look at the companies that you and I both know and the people that we know and the entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs that are within this business and this industry, they are the people that are the ones most successful, the ones that are most agile and moving, because in ways this sector doesn't change a lot because we're all we know who we know and we know what we know, but then it changes hugely because those minds continuously having to come together to solve new problems. And it's I don't know, maybe people in other sectors go, our sector is the most unique sector, but I just think it's so unique because of the pace.
Yeah.
It's tying your shoelaces while you're going across a tightrope, you know, 1,000,000 miles above in the sky. So, loads of people can stop and tie their shoelaces, but can you do it on a tightrope while you're, above a pit of loads of crocodiles, alligators, and sharks at the same time? You know, because that's what I visualize when I see messing up within the data center sector. Yeah. So I try not to mess up.
Yeah. Well, at least if you mess up, don't bring me down with you. It's hard enough for me to balance. Well, I'm curious then. So Ireland has this amazing story and history. I mean, throughout certainly the United States history. One of the most important people groups that has helped populate the United States for sure. And at the same time, I hopefully will be there this spring, so that would be great. My very first trip over. But it also feels like sometimes, and maybe you can help clarify, some of the news coming out of Ireland is, hold on, are we fully embracing the data center industry or digital infrastructure or whatever? Your good friend Gary Connolly, who I've had the privilege of interviewing a couple times, I've seen his posts and conversation, and I'm not very familiar with it. Can you help us to understand what's going on in Ireland now as it relates to whether it's data center industry or some of the things that we're talking about? Is it the same pace? Are things changing? Help us to understand the situation.
Yeah, interesting. I suppose, look, as we know, the demand globally has gone up and up and up and up and up. And some would say that it hasn't even started yet, right? But and Ireland was one of those first early movers when we look at that European market. I mean, Gary, we said this before, we've got that flap, and then we've got that flap -D that we talk about. So Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris is our flap, and then -D for Dublin. And Dublin, in many ways, I mean, even look, a lot of the end clients have their European offices in Dublin city centre. Actually, a walk away from where my new office is, where we moved into town before Christmas. So we have been the early leaders, but over the last, I mean, with the speed and scale that we've been growing at as an industry, the last 5 years it's come at us thick and fast, and Ireland has found itself very far behind in the energy space, in the power space. We didn't invest in renewables. We don't have nuclear, and we have now hit grid constraints, massive ones, and I know they're everywhere. But there was some decisions, and I don't want to definitely don't want to get into politics here because I'm not a politician. You talked earlier about languages, so I definitely wouldn't be allowed in those rooms. But there was decisions made and people who run countries. To me, they run businesses. So I don't want to question the reasons they made the decisions.
We're not getting into the motives. We're just trying to understand what's going on.
They would have done something for a certain reason, but we have been left behind in the ability. There is a moratorium, basically, and there is not any real new entrants to Ireland at the moment, and there's issues with the power piece, and there are people a lot more suited to talk about the intricacies of the power piece. But for me, Ireland is pretty much at a, I wouldn't say a stop, but a very slow pace, and probably will be for the next 3 years until we work on certain things. There's a lot of changes. There's a big change in government at the moment. I was at an event last week in Dublin where there was some of our politicians were there talking, and they are looking at making changes. But there's a great feeling that, in AI we talk about the waves, and we're on the crest of the first wave of AI, and Ireland has missed it. And it's, as an Irishman, a proud Irishman, a proud data center person who really sees himself engrossed in both of those cultures, it's a sad day because we have been a leader in those sectors. Now, one of the great things is we still get to be a leader, but outside our own country. So Irish people are building and involved in the design, construct, and operate of data centers all around Europe. But as Ireland, as it is at the moment, we're falling behind.
Yeah. The Irish are resilient people, though. They're some of the most resilient, and you know this. I know you know it. I'm not telling you anything new or any of our audience, but it's so many of the most remarkable stories. There's so many groups of people, some of them also on islands, that they have great moment in time in history, and they fade away, and they become less relevant in some circumstances. And the Irish people, over and over and over, not just calling out to, the Scots-Irish in my heritage, but where we started the conversation, they just know how to do hard things, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're going anywhere as a nation, and I do think there'll be a bounce back. I do think there's a lot of things been worked on in the background, much above my head, and above where I sit within it. But I do believe we will bounce back. I just hope that it's soon enough, I suppose for the good of our country and our industry, and for feeding our industry with very strong people, because as long as we are heavily involved at home in the technology sector, we'll be even better at growing, I suppose, the people for the future. Because I think, look, it's funny, I mentioned earlier about farming, and potatoes were our biggest export. I think people is our biggest export.
Right.
And professional people. I mean, people from Ireland are traveling all around the world to lead businesses, to be involved in businesses, because they learn first at home. Most of us learn at home first before we go abroad.
Right.
So if we are not busy at home within this sector, will we develop the same people? Because the college education, the school education is only one bit. The on the job, the real life experience, the degree of life is where we really learn what we put to work in the industry. So yeah, I really hope that we can pull back out of that. But while the people who can control that, so control the controllables, while the government and people in legislation and people who, people like your own company and similar companies who are heavily based in Ireland will continue to push for that. I and people like me will control the controllables within our business, which is let's continue to utilize our expertise in the rest of the European market and the international data center market, because the market is hot right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very hot right now.
Yeah. An area that, so we have been in the Netherlands for a number of years, but we're expanding across my organization, across parts of Europe. And one of the things that we learned when we began moving outside of the Netherlands and into these other areas, and it was just completely accidental that we did this. I don't know that it's uncommon, but it was, when we say the States, we think of the United States. And there is, to a great degree, like contracts and interstates and connectivity, but it's a big place. And so there's a lot of nuance from Northern Virginia to Dallas, Texas, to Atlanta, Georgia, to the San Francisco Bay Area and everything in between. You've been spending time in Texas and Austin, even within Texas, which is a monster state. There are 3 or 4 giant metropolitan areas, and then micro or a little bit smaller, which are still bigger metropolitan areas in many parts of the world. And when we first started thinking about Europe, we just thought of it as this unified, very homogenous, or at least I did. I shouldn't probably speak for the organization, but I did. And what we've learned is, no, it's very different. Like it seems obvious, but if you don't spend time doing business there, and so when you think about Europe, where at least in the interim, Moy Materials and you are going to spend a lot of time in other places outside of Ireland as that expands. What is the difference between Europe, either in the, as a whole, and maybe in these different zones that data centers and digital infrastructure is growing? We've talked a lot about Ireland, but how is Europe evolving?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's funny you mentioned the Netherlands. That's where we did our first job outside of Ireland. And I suppose the big thing for our business and a lot of other businesses is that, leaving Ireland is not a new thing. We've been out in the mainland Europe market for a decade, right? And so we're already very present. The name is there. It's not like, and not just our company, Ireland Inc., as I said earlier, right? So Europe, I suppose, has been coming in pockets and waves over the last decade or more. The Netherlands was one of them first early ones. And look, what happens in our sector, as we both know, is, a hyperscaler will pop down somewhere, and then another hyperscaler will come and join, and then then there's people like ourselves and your companies and lots of other companies that are then servicing those clients. So the Netherlands, then into Germany has been very heavily populated for a long time, and then into Denmark and numerous different countries. So there's been plenty coming up over the years. We're 18 countries now in Europe. We've been involved in data centers, and so what is Europe is convenient because for me, if you look at Europe in general, it's 2-3 hours max flight away from Dublin to every region. And going back to childhood and going back to just people like to travel, each country is a little bit different, and the language is different. But when you get into business, it's so different, from Germany to the Nordic states to, even, you go to the likes of Belgium, and it can be different in building typologies and in cultural piece, but even like design, building code. So if you look at Belgium, for example, it's not that big of a country, but they have two totally, Flanders and Wallonia, which are two areas, and excuse me if I have any Belgian friends and I've pronounced either of them wrong, I'm really sorry, but there's two regions that are totally different in relation to their design typologies and building control and building regulation. And there's so many of them all across Europe. So although in the US, you'll have Miami-Dade and you'll have different areas and categories, the typology of building and the mindset in engineering within our sector is, it's not that hugely different, I guess. Correct me if I'm wrong, from state to state within the sector that we're in.
Yeah.
But when we go across Europe, it's so different because the design biases and the design criteria, because you've got to not only meet the US design criteria, you then probably might have to meet Irish and UK design criteria, weirdly, because the engineers and architects, the AE, the architectural and engineering teams, are probably based out of the UK and Ireland for a lot of these data centres that are in mainland Europe. So you're building to their kind of mindset, specification and guidelines. And then you've got to hit that for each country that you're going to as well, and for the individual countries. And it's so different and so uniquely different. I mean, you look at countries like, Finland that get very, very little sunlight in the winter. So the culture, the humans there, the people, their way of life is very different to ours. So we have to understand that when we enter there.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest bits, is the human piece, is how do we localize even though we're not local? How do we localize even though we might not be staying? We're there for work, for jobs, for the period. But how do we embrace and get embraced by the local environment? And they're probably some of the biggest challenges, I think.
We were talking about, before the podcast started, how Georgia's become such a marketplace for making movies, television shows and movies internationally, because it created the economic conditions for people to come to the state, live in the state, make a great living, make great content, and put it out. And they've attracted them from other parts of the world to do that. So when you look at Europe, is there a great diversity, like and we don't need to name the countries, but parts are more welcoming, or they're reluctantly engaging?
I think that's exactly it, right? I think parts are, certain government, obviously, look, there's incentive for these countries and these governments to allow to have data centers within their country, and it works for them. It's an income stream. Right. But there are certain countries and certain regions that, the elbows are out and they don't want them there in the first place. And if they do, then they don't want somebody from outside building them or telling them how to build. And especially from a code and a design perspective. And I think, there's new design concepts coming in, which are American, British and Irish, because that's the combination of what's been brought generally to a lot of these regions, and they don't want to adapt. They don't want to adapt and adopt them. And when I say they don't want to, I'm not knocking it, because these people have managed to build very, very successful, good countries all by themselves without a load of us coming in and showing them how to build things.
Well, we're going to fix that. That's what they say. I'm just teasing. Somebody was like, I was bragging about something not long ago, and they said, we have 1,000-year-old churches here that are in and of themselves works of art. Like the smallest balcony with this ornate glass or whatever is so much more beautiful than your box church in your suburb. And
Absolutely,
I'm like, well, whatever. I guess you guys got something to talk about. But I'm curious, in America, part of our regular conversations are how we connect with community. Like, it's not just how we do code. It is how we manage natural resources. It is what really, as an operator, and the customers that live within our data centers really do engage sustainable initiatives. What really is it like from an economic development? Not any one of these things is the sum of the conversation. How do you really, once people are employed there, what kind of neighbor are you? How do you integrate? I got to believe that's similar as you're growing across Europe.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's becoming more and more relevant. I think people are taking that more seriously in the last 5 years, and I think it's probably because of the scale, because we were in and out of countries. But I think, yeah, how do we localize? How do we become at one, with that local environment? And there's a lot of, no matter where you go in the world, there's a lot of bad press our sector gets, right? It's water sapping, energy, electricity sapping. They don't actually employ any people. All these things, right? So it's trying to educate, these nations and these countries and people that actually, we add a lot.
Right.
There's not a single other sector in the world that is not, tapping into what we're doing and helping them move forward. I was talking last week at an event, and we were chatting about, the mind's eye, like even you look at planning permission, right, to build a unit. Well, we'll build a shopping centre because that's going to employ 2,000 or 200 people, and it's and we build a data centre the same size next door and it'll employ 5 people. And it's like, well, okay, and but that data centre has a life cycle, and it's got a mapped out life cycle. Yourselves and your designers are sitting there and saying, right, we've got to map out the life cycle cost of this building, and within that they have designed in costs associated with the technology, heating, cooling, the racks, everything changing multiple times over that 20 years or whatever that is. Who do people think are going to design all that technology and change all that technology? It's people in businesses, but they're just off-site. But they're just not in the centre, but they're working in the set. They're working for the centre. They're working toward, so I think my point, I suppose I'm rambling a little bit there, but my point is that we have to educate people. This is a relatively new sector. People are scared of it. People don't like change, but we have to bring that knowledge to these other countries. And because we have one thing that you don't have when you move from state to state, I know some people might beg to differ with this one, but you don't have a language barrier. It is a complexity.
You've obviously not been to Arkansas.
And I knew there was going to be a comment like that. Usually when I say that in
I'm
America,
teasing,
people are like, yeah, but we work over there
Yeah,
or here.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
not going to name any of them because I don't want to be
Yeah.
the one that picked on any of them. But,
Right.
but and not only do we have one language barrier, we have multiple. We're going from country to country to country, numerous different languages, numerous different cultures. And that brings complexity.
Yeah.
I like it because it brings challenge,
Right.
and which, for every challenge, as I say at home to our kids, it's like, what is there for every problem? And my kids will repeat what I've, I wouldn't say beaten into them, but what I've
Right.
brought into them and said over and over again as solutions. We don't think about problems, we think about solutions.
Yeah. When you said bad press, I've heard that a couple times. I've started changing that idea in my mind, which is it's sometimes what will happen, because I have these conversations regularly, people think we're trying to hide something, like, oh, it's bad press, we discovered something that's true, and now it's being exposed. You should want that. And I'm like, well, hold on. That's not what I mean. What I mean is a narrative has been told around some of the things we've talked about, resources or the number of jobs within a data center, the types of jobs within a data center. Just as importantly, all the things that come along ancillary, both at the building of a data center stabilization, the infrastructure that's going in and out of through regular change of a data center, these things. And so what we want to do is have an opportunity to engage on things that are inaccurate. I used to say confront misinformation. That sounds way more aggressive than what I mean. But if something is inaccurate, like we should all want the truth. What's the truth? If it's inconvenient for our industry, it's inconvenient, and let's discuss it and see if we can reach an accord, as my friend Jack Sparrow would say in Pirates of the Caribbean. But let's just go to the truth. Is this true? Do data centers take all of your power? Or do they bring stabilization to the grid and help pour into the infrastructure? I think the single biggest, my fact checkers will fact check this, and this may or may not be accurate, but what I've heard is if not the number one investor in green energy, intermittent energy, through PPAs and other things. Certainly one of the largest are data center organizations who help fund those things. We're as interested as anybody else in intermittent power getting firmed up so it can serve base load, so it can serve these other things. Like, why wouldn't we want that? Not only is it good for our industry, it's our planet too. Like, we all want to be part of it, right? But we've been a group of introverted engineers that my friends always laugh when I say that. Okay, one extrovert in a group of introverted engineers. But to be able to come and tell a story, and I don't just mean an economic story. I think sometimes where we get in trouble is we just want to show up and say, look at how we're going to pay for your taxes, and look at how it is important. Of course, we got to feed our children, but not pouring kerosene into the river, not damaging the world around us. Like, we need to, it needs to fit to purpose on where these things are being deployed. But a third of the world's not connected to the internet, and half the world's not connected to broadband. And how do you lift your tribe, your people, your family out of poverty or connect them to the economy if you're not purposefully connected? Now, if you're one of the lucky 0.5% few where, you got enough economic resources that you can retire somewhere and do whatever you want. You don't have to be connected. Yeah. But for everybody else, they have to be connected in some way. And we want to facilitate that, not in a gross way, but in a way that makes sense for that local community, for that nation state, for the group of people, and then connect them. And so I do think all of us have to some degree, become evangelists. Maybe not with the big E like I am, but with a little e. Why do you want to be an electrician or an attorney or a room cleaner or a project manager or organizer in an organization that helps support these things? How does it help you meet your personal goals, but also help your community around you?
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. I think what you're saying about the evangelist piece there, I think it's so important that people within this sector, we get that opportunity, and I know it's a bad precedent, but I see it as a great opportunity to tell people about this sector and what it does and what we can get involved in. And I think that people like you and I and lots of other people within this sector, we need to get better and better about that, like, talking about it. And I think, look, it is becoming more, another friend of ours says it's becoming mainstream. It is becoming more and more mainstream. There's a lot more of them. There's a lot more data centers around than there was 10 years ago, and a lot more people working in the sector. So by default, more people, when you're in a room, like, oh yeah, I do. I have a third cousin or somebody else that was saying they were doing data center stuff or cloud stuff, and there's more and more of it. Whereas I'm sure when you were in the data center sector first, and what do you do? And it's like, yeah, I'm going to say something different because they're just going to look at me and go, what's that? And
right.
So I think we owe it to tell that story, because I think you're right. I've heard it a few times before that, like, there's no single industry investing more in environmental studies than this sector. I've heard that. I'm not saying just because both of us heard it makes it true, but I've heard it before a few times. And I think it makes sense, So I think we as a sector, and I think at an event I was at not so long ago, there was a panel on this, that fork in the road place we are, that kind of, right, we're here at a pinnacle point, and this industry is going to keep going, but it can go one way or it can go another. We can continue to drive on and say, look, we're just going to do it no matter what, or we're going to be part of. We're not outside, like you say. It's not a digital economy; it's just economy, right? So it's not the data center set. It's just we are involved in. We are in the world, and we have a place within it. But we owe it back to the environment that we're within, and people need to understand that, and on both sides, and it's all very well to say, oh, well, they have to understand why we're here because we're here to help everybody. Well, we have to understand why is there fear, why is there concerns, and allay those fears and concerns.
Yeah. Not every story is a misinformation story. There have been misses. There have been things that an operator didn't do well or wasn't transparent on or ignored the stated concern of a community. But we for sure have to become not sophisticated in the how do I manipulate this story, but just being transparent. Yeah. First listening, which is not always my strong suit, and then hearing, and then being able to respond to the concern in a real way. And to the degree that we do that, I think we'll be much more successful for everybody's benefit, because we really believe we're bringing a benefit to these communities.
100%. And I think, it's like anything. When you believe truly in what you're doing, I think we'll find a better way to communicate that. Because we do genuinely, I know a lot of the leaders within our industry and our sector, and, there's a genuinely strong belief in what we do, and that we can make a difference. And I think that's where it becomes, not about just the technology, but about the people, the people within it, and how we tell that story and how we talk. And we were having a conversation earlier, but bringing people into the business because they help you go that little bit further. You can do something, but how do we show people what we can do? How do we tell them? How do we communicate that? And I mean, most of the world's biggest problems are through, poor communication, and lack thereof. I definitely said earlier, I'm not getting into politics. I'm definitely not going to start talking about war. But we think about it. Money and lack of communication are the causes of most of the problems we see around us. And so I think if we continually work on that, and I think it's one of the things I like most about our sector, I think, is there's a lot of really, really smart people from a technology perspective that without them, like you said, the tech people, the engineers, the designers, the code writers, the people who are designing this kit and this equipment, that's smart, but also a lot of smart people who understand how to build businesses, who have been involved in, in helping to build some of the world's other great infrastructures, and are now within the data center sector, and people like yourself who have come from military, who have dealt with very large conflicts, and now are within this sector. And I think now what we're seeing is, we're not just in an industry of extremely intelligent tech folk, but we have multiple levels of intelligence within it. So that kind of, we talk about diversity in a different way now. We bring all those diverse mindsets into the room together. Actually, you know what? We can create a story here. And I don't mean create a story as in, fiction. I'm talking about fact. We can actually create a picture that can show people what it is we're actually doing here. And how we can, create a harmonized and better environment.
When you look at Europe in general, do you think there are regions that are more, kind of like here in the States, accepting, let's figure it out, let's do it? I don't know if I want to put you on the spot to say, where do you think that's accelerating more? And then I guess my second part of the question is, in the States, we have a lot of big campuses. It's not uncommon that we're moving to big campuses. I wonder if it's going to be like that in Europe, or is it going to be, smaller campus topology?
Yeah, I think there's a mix. I think when we look at like geography and we look at the way, you look at, so at the moment, like Frankfurt has been a really, really busy area for a long, long time, and Frankfurt is part of the flap. It's the start,
right?
And it's going to continue to be. But a lot of it's city centre. It's that. So biggest complexities there. The bit you were talking about earlier. How do we make these buildings? How do we bring them into the landscape? How do we bring them into the skyscape? You know what I mean? And so their biggest complexities are different. It's how we become part of that city centre. Whereas then we look outside, we look at, Dublin was like that, but Denmark, Sweden, a lot more green and brown field areas. And so the complexities are different. I think what we, look, if we just look at the European market for a second, that flap D, Dublin would be busy if we had power, right?
When you have the power, you will be busy like the other markets.
Absolutely, no different, right? So those markets are busy, but now there are different incumbents, like Spain, Barcelona and Madrid are huge. They're really up and coming. Zaragoza, we see around Nordic states. We see Helsinki now coming up. And a lot of other places around Europe are coming to the fore. Milan has recently, there are arguments. I think it's 990 megawatts now active or under development and construction in the Milan region. So there are arguments now that could almost be bolted on to the flap D,
Right.
So I don't know how I just did that flap
guy. Flap D.
So I suppose there's a lot going on. Like you got to remember, like you look at all the reports and all the stats for data centers. Like it's Europe is following a very similar trend to the rest of the world, and US seems to be quite high. I think it's about 25%. Compound growth year on year they're expecting for the next 2 to 3 years from the reports I'm reading.
Right.
And Europe, depending on the region, is tracking anywhere between 15 and 20%. So very similar, right?
Right.
15%. 15 to 20% compound growth,
Right.
for the next 3 to 5 years is there's very few other sectors able to say that. So each country is getting a wave. Each country, some it looks like they're growing by 300 and 400% because they're at the very early stage. But so I think any country that's able to resource and give the power will have opportunity.
Yeah. Here we're investigating heavily on-site power.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it will be the same there, or do they have capacity in the grid to absorb the growth that they're?
I think, and this is where number one, I'm not a power expert. Number two, it's going to be different each country by country by country. But I think they are looking at on-site power. How do we do that? There are certain regions in Europe now looking at the SMRs, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's funny, isn't it? Even that word nuclear. There are certain countries. No.
Right.
But I think I remember coming to US conferences. I think it was a conference in New York about 2017, and it was the first time I really heard about nuclear power being utilized within the data center sector. And it was, there was a lot of talk, and that's 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's only really in the last 12 months in Europe, I'm hearing some people now, it's very hot and cold,
Right.
totally against it or totally for it. But it's only in the last recent years that I'm starting to hear people say, yeah, well, we have to adopt it and adapt it. And I think it's got a place.
Yeah. And it will be interesting to see as the dynamics of life play out, who embrace whatever their energy source is, but being able to get to energy sovereignty has got to be super important.
It's got to be so important, doesn't it? And it's it's. I think it's something that I watch play out because there's only limited piece that I can play in those conversations.
Right.
I'm definitely a very eager spectator in a lot of it. When I go to a lot of these conferences, I'm really keen to learn about the power piece and understand, both as an individual within the sector, but also a citizen of the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think I think that's going to be the key race.
Yeah.
That whoever can figure that piece out, right?
Safe,
clean
affordable, local, clean power has got to be one of the most important initiatives.
Absolutely.
You got to be connected. You got to have clean, always available, affordable power. If you don't, you're not part of the economy.
No. You will be pushed away, I think.
One of the areas when I first got to hear your voice, you're in a podcast with our buddy Kirk, and one of the things that we talked about, or that you talked about in that conversation, to coin a phrase, was about mental health. Like that was a part of it. And so can you tell a little bit about your story there? And then also let's talk about just how do we help the people within our industry just stay connected as we move through this complex period of our life?
Yeah, interesting series of questions and interesting comments. I think for me, actually, that's the stuff that gets me out of bed in the morning, right? I run a business. It's in the data center sector, which is a really fast-paced environment, and I love it. But what I love is running a business, a people business. And I work in an industry where I deal with people all the time, and we deal with problems and complexities. I think that the speed and scale pace is what attracts most of us to this industry. There's people that are built to solve problems, but then it creates a lot of complexities and problems for us too, as individuals, as human beings. I point here, we've got the body piece, right? And, I've talked about this before many times. You fall over, you hurt yourself, someone will give you crutches, they'll give you a plaster, a bandage, but if all this speed and scale stuff is getting heavy in the head and we're trying to juggle all those things we're talking about and walk across that tightrope, sometimes people can't see that and don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think for individual human beings, that's, in any walk of life, that's difficult. But, we've got to mind the humans. We've got to mind the mind. And I think if I bring it back initially to myself, I mean, I've been very open about my struggles with my mental health over the years. I mean, I struggled to fit in for many years. I don't want to repeat what I've necessarily said in other environments, but I've struggled to fit in for many years, and I tried really, really hard. But really, I didn't fit in with myself because I just didn't know where I was, who I was, what I stood for. And I struggled with my mental health, and I have done for many years in different ways. I battled addiction, I've found ways and means to deal with different scenarios. But one thing that I found, and even when you battle something and then you come through that and you battle something new, one of the things that's a common denominator is that people is what have helped me get out of it at any time or enticed me to. The humans, the kind-hearted humans that have helped you and put a hand out and said, hold on, kid, let's have a look at this. And when you step back and look with other humans, taking away, the speed and scale of our industry. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? We don't pause enough. We don't stop enough. So we're just so in a hurry to do everything. And the same in life, before the sector. And you need to we get to a place where we're just in this circle, this vacuum, this, I can picture a tornado, and you're in the middle of it and you're just going around and around and around. And eventually something's got to give, and for me, that happened on numerous occasions, on a couple of different occasions in my life. Most recently, I had a burnout about 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years ago in the end of April. And then post that, I've decided I've given up alcohol, and we talked earlier about caffeine. I've given up caffeine. But for me, they're human struggles. They're real people struggles, and I'm not the only one with them. And lots of other people have them too, in our company, in the different companies. And for me, I think it's so important that we look at how in this fast-paced environment we mind the other people within our sector and within our industry, and especially those that are going to come into it. We're going to bring an awful, like this, as we said earlier, all the stuff we talked about so far is how quickly and how big this sector is going to get. So if there's already a lot of people working in the sector, there's going to be even more. We got to help them mind themselves. We got to help ourselves as an industry of individuals, as citizens of the earth, to mind ourselves. And look, I suppose I've done a lot of things over time that weren't minding myself. I dealt with stress and anxiety by drinking alcohol, for example, and pushed down the feelings and emotions that way. So I know how not to do it. And I've done a lot of work on myself and trying to find better ways to do it. Doesn't mean I'm a guru and I know the secret sauce and how to do it. But I think there's an awareness that's really important. And I want to give others space to be able to do that, about within the company and within the sector.
Yeah. Many times our strength is also our Achilles heel, right? It just is.
Yeah.
And so the things that attract us, or at least the people that stick and stay, don't mind the hard things, see these opportunities. If we're not careful, we will we won't be at our healthiest mentally. And you're exactly right. And those things are hidden. And so one of the things I learned a number of years ago was, especially during times of war or conflict, the number one reasons why people re-enlist in a military unit globally, doesn't matter, is because they don't want to leave the battle to their brothers and sisters without them there. Like, everybody's got to come home. And it's not because they want to be a career military person or first responder or a nurse at the hospital, whatever. Who's going to fill the gap if I'm not there?
Yeah. And I think it's funny. You mentioned Kirk, so I'll mention him again. Like, when we talked very deep, one day in one of the podcasts I did with him, just about the story where I've been, the darkness, the difficult moments. And we were out for a hike one day, and he asked me, like, can we talk? He said, "What's your story?" And we talked about it, and then he asked, "Could we do it on a podcast?" But for me, one of the things I've found so interesting about post doing that podcast, and that's how we met each other. Right?
Yeah.
You reached out to me after listening to that.
I started crying during that podcast. Yeah, I loved it.
And look, I'm touched by that because, you know, that was the only me I have, which is the real me. And that's what me and Kirk agreed. We were, just bring the real Carl and we'll just have a chat. And like we're doing today, we're just having a conversation. But what really hit me after that was the amount of people that have reached out to me. The amount of people, you know, I think honestly in the last year, there's very few weeks that someone hasn't reached out to me, whether a text message, a LinkedIn message, or face to face. Hey man, I'm really, you know, I won't talk to loads of other people about this because, you know, they're my boss or they're my boss's boss, or, you know, I don't want to show weakness, but how did you do this or how did you do that? And the fact, the point I'm making is not that those people are coming to me. I'm delighted they're coming to somebody, and I'm available. And I said it's something I said live. Well, it wasn't live, but you know what I mean, on the podcast that day. I said, please do reach out, and I mean that, right? Because we have to have that first place to reach out to, and you know, but although it saddens me that there's so many people coming to say that they have a problem, I'm delighted that they're saying it to somebody because they might not have before, and they've just hidden that problem. And I did that for many years and push it down and push it down and push it down. It doesn't mean that I'm the, you know, the mental health whisperer, or that, you know, that I'm a guru of it. It just means that, you know, I know what it's like to have dark days. I think a lot of us do. I think most of us do, to be honest. And I think it's about being available and making things available. So I think, like, it's okay. So, for example, somebody approached me in recent weeks and said, look, you know, we're at data center events. Sure, everybody's drinking. You know, I know I need to stop, but I don't know how to stop, because how do I stop coming to the events? And we talked about how that was for me. And I think even just knowing that there's someone else not doing it, it's like, oh, okay, do you know what? Yeah. Like, yeah, I don't need to. And it's, you know, because it's about being true to yourself, you know, and doing whatever's right for you. But I think sometimes, even as adults, we talk about as kids feeling peer pressure, right? But as adults, we do too. Oh, I better do that. Oh, yeah, well, tonight I'm out with Dave and he likes a glass of red wine. And tomorrow night I'm out with Johnny and he likes a pint of Guinness. So before I know it, I'm at Friday and I'm blaming everybody else for the reason that I had 6 units of alcohol every single night.
That's right.
But that's on me, you know, and it's my decision. And whatever lifestyle choice we're making, I didn't go to the gym this morning because, you know, Dave said I have to meet him at 7. Well, you know, we have to at some point step in and say, right, I'm going to take a certain amount of control and ownership here. And I think we just have to get better at that as a group. Because on the other side, we have this group of people that are so driven, so motivated. We want to solve problems. We tend not to say no. That's how we've done well in our careers, because we said, yeah, okay, I'll fix it. And if I can't, I'll hire somebody else that'll help me fix it and we'll solve these problems. Yeah. But then by doing that, we're actually not taking much time for ourselves, you know? And I'm sitting here doing this podcast, and I'm sure maybe my wife does actually listen to them, and she listens and go, yeah, but you're great at saying that about other people, but you don't really do it yourself. And I'm getting better. I'm trying. It's one of them things, isn't it? It's a labor of love, because I'm trying every day to improve, to put things in place. But one of the first, I suppose, I'm fortunate enough that I own a business, a small business, but I own a business, right? I say it's small. I mean, it's, you know, multiple millions, right? But it's small in the hyperscalers that we're working amidst, right? But I'm very proud to own the business, and I'm proud also that I can make an impact for the people that work for us, and put things in place in relation to mental health supports, in relation to wellness, and hopefully for our sector. I've been, you know, the last number of events I've been at, we've organised wellness mornings, wellness days, just in that crazy week that is a conference week, a 4-day, 3-day whirlwind where you're sleeping an average 4 hours a night, and God knows calories you're eating. And the funny thing about it is you don't eat often, but when you do, man, do you stock up, and it's just quick convenience food. Yeah. So to have an hour or two in that industry where actually, you know what, we're going to do a wellness morning, but we're actually all going to do it together. So you're still networking, you're still meeting. And the same way I see it as, I used to justify for myself when I drank quite a bit of alcohol, but I'm working. I'm with Dave and we're having 6 pints of stout and we're having 10 whiskeys, but I'm with a client and he's really happy and I'm happy, so brilliant. So the same way, why can't we do that on the flip side with the wellness and fitness stuff? You know, let's you know, Kirk and the team did it, you know, the 30 for 30s. Let's go for a walk for an hour and talk business instead of having 10 glasses of wine or whatever it might be. And we can do both, by the way. Just because I choose not to drink alcohol doesn't mean I'm here preaching. This isn't the religion of Cathal and giving up all stuff that's fun. You know,
It started
works
to
for me.
control you. I think it starts with first you being vulnerable. I'm just going to be honest. Because that's two things. One, it tells you about where you've come from, but also that if down the road, it can make you vulnerable. Like, well, wait a minute, people are watching how Cathal behaves. And so there's a commitment. There's a real commitment there on who we are as human beings. But I haven't had quite that level of impact, but I've had so many conversations with people at breakfasts and dinners or after an event in a variety of ways that are connected either to mental health or just my personal story. And I've watched their jaw drop, and later, sometimes in the group, but most of the time individually, come up and say, I think the same way, or whatever, or I've struggled with these same things, whatever they may be. And as much as I love to do my job, and I love my job, and I love being part of our people, our tribe of people, but the thing that gives me mission and purpose the most outside of my personal family is connecting with human beings on these things, and we find some element in common that we can connect on. It's incredible.
The ability to be able to relate with another. So human beings, we're so uniquely different. Every single one of us. It's one of the things I love most, about this race. Every single one of us. You can have two identical twins in a room, but there's differences inside. And how they embrace the world. And it goes back to earlier. Actually, we were even talking about the center, right? The data center. It looks the same, but it's different because they have the whole environment, the people, the location, the weather, everything. So us humans are so different that. And I think that's why a lot of times we think when we're feeling a problem, or we're like, oh God, that's stupid, or that's Dave's been through much bigger stuff for me, so I won't tell him my problem because it's only little. It's your problem, right? And it's real for you. And the thing I love about people is that even though we're so uniquely different, someone will always relate to it. Someone will say, you know what, that reminds me so much of a different scenario, but it's similar in this way or in that way. And people get so much solace from that. And I'm like you, outside of the happiness and well-being of my family, is of critical importance, and that's number one. But having an impact and connecting with other human beings in this industry and in this environment is for me the most enjoyable piece. I love what we're building. I love what we're involved in. I love the scale and speed, but it's the human relationships within that is just so special and so unique. And if we can help each other along the way. My grandfather always said, and I said this on one of the first, actually wasn't a podcast, it was a barstool chat with Gary Connolly that you mentioned earlier. And one of the first things I talked very fondly of my grandfather, Gorbals man from inner city Glasgow. And he always said, mistakes are there to be made, right? And you make them and you learn from them. And if you can learn from another human being's mistake, that's a free lesson. And now you're free to go off and make a different mistake and learn. Because every mistake is not really a mistake, it's a learning opportunity, right? So learn from another human's learning opportunities, learn from them, and then you'll fall and make your own. And I really believe that, and I think we can continually learn from each other all the time. And it's actually one of the things I get most out of, spending time with people in our sector, because sometimes it's about personal well-being and stuff, and then sometimes it's about the industry, and I never thought of the problem that way. I mean, I could be thinking of running my business in a certain manner, and I could be talking to someone who is an end client or someone who is an MEP designer, and say, did you, and I'm not talking about engineering, just saying, did you ever think about this? Oh God, you know what, I didn't. But now that you mention that, if I adapt that, and I love that, and if we're supposed to bring it back to the mental health piece, these minds are busy places, so we gotta mind it. We gotta mind each other, and I think what we have to do, in my opinion, is we have to promote a culture of it's okay to take a little bit of time out to mind yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think the culture here has been, boom, quick, gotta hurry. These clients want them, they want them quick. Right. Yeah, but they also want us alive so we can do the next ones and the next ones and the next ones. So let's, sometimes, I remember an employee of mine saying it years and years ago. He said, we were having a conversation about something, nothing to do with any of this stuff. And he said, sometimes we just have to stop and tie our shoelaces. And I think that's really important. We just have to take a breath, just stop for a minute. And how often do we take a break and then we are actually stronger for that break, whether it's an hour, whether it's half an hour, whether it's a nap, whether it's a week off, whatever it is. And you think, oh no, I have to hurry, I have to get all this stuff done, but you take a pause and then you go again. You're actually stronger again. So, we have to promote that being okay, I think.
So we all have our stuff, whatever it looks like. Slow drop, added over time, big milestones, whatever it is. Don't compare.
No.
Your pain is your pain. And then the second part is, let's be transparent and take that pause. The other side of that, though, is you got to have integrity and honesty around that. Like, are you pausing just for pausing's sake?
Yeah.
Or are you actually healing? And the result of that, in NASCAR, they have this idea of go slow to go fast. You slow down, enter the turn, so you can rocket out of the turn, right? Yeah. We have this great American classic called Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise, who illustrates that. It's a great piece of American art if you've never seen it.
I've definitely seen it.
But that's, that's the point. But if the result was you're slowing down and you just keep ending up slower, that's not the solution, right?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we see, people talk about, we were mentioning earlier about nuclear, for example, right? And the way that we think that younger people are going to think about it is very different than the way they think about it. So the same with, we give all these benefits and we say, okay, we're going to take mental health days. No matter what you get in life or you give in life, some people will take advantage of it, right? And we have to manage that too because, we got to slow, as you said, we're slowing down to be able to ramp back up, to be able to, to move again in a different way. But if we're just slowing for the sake of slowing, then we're, there's no benefit in that. And I think that's the important bit. That's what I like about this sector again. The people within it, they want to get going as quickly as possible. They just want to, if they're willing to kind of hold their hands up and say, I just want to find a safe environment and a safe way in which to do that. And I think that's what's key. It's that human, it's that people piece. And it's just, I smile because I bloody love it. Like, you know what I mean? I love just working with other people and seeing people that want to. The other day, last week, I was out with 3 other blokes, all from our sector. So we ranged from, 42, 4 of us total, 42 to, I don't know, 51, 52. And funny enough, you know a few of them, right? Or 1 or 2 of them. But we were together and we were having a conversation about, we were all from the sector, we were having a conversation about data centers, but we went on to mental health. Right. And we were talking about blokes and how we feel and how we're terrible at talking. But what we were talking about was that, how bad men are about talking about this, blah, blah, blah. And one of them stopped and goes, but we're talking about it right now. And we're 4 blokes. Like 10 years ago, there's no way 4 guys, in high-powered business, whatever way you want to see it, we having a conversation about how we feel. Right. And I was talking about something that happened, and they bring a tear to your eye and make you cry, and talking about times when you're on medication and different things, and we're like, look at what we're talking about. Isn't it great? Yeah. That we because I know in my father's generation, which isn't that long ago, there's no way there would have been 4 blokes having a business meeting talking about their mental health and how they feel and really how they feel. Right. So I think for me, and I think at least 2 of us, but I think we all probably stopped for a minute and went, this is cool. Yeah. This is cool.
It's really cool because what I think, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a chaplain for special operations, so Rangers, Special Forces, whatever, and I said, we're having a conversation about PTSD, and he was the chaplain that first of all, he was deployed with many of these groups, but he also, when he was at home, had to go to the families when somebody was lost or seriously injured, and it was spectacularly hard. But he also met with the soldiers that were really struggling with mental health, sometimes suicidal. Like, it's a big struggle. And I said, what's the difference between them and my grandfather's generation that fought World War II? And he said, first of all, they dealt with they still had PTSD, but there were different mechanisms by which they dealt with it. But you really just didn't talk about it like we're just describing now. And part of that was the fear was that it would lead you to an unhealthy place. And what I am inspired by your story is, while you're having that transparent conversation and you're building those friendships and the ability to communicate, you are also building infrastructure at scale and speed. It's ironic. It's that pause, like Cole Trickle did, or you are describing, it's a pause moment, it's a connection moment, whatever that looks like. And you're rejuvenating, and you're loaning some of your soul to other people, or they're loaning to yours, which is the highest order of being a human being, where you're doing this stuff. And you're continuing in whether you're a doctor or a cop or a data center operator or whatever it is, and you're deploying this infrastructure, like that is the slam dunk when you do it all.
But look, it's like you describing there a few minutes ago, people, re-enlisting in the services, right? So I had burnout 2 years ago. It could have been, I only owned the company about a year and a half at that stage, but it could have been quite easy for me to come out and say, "Do you know what, I'll sell it for what I bought it for, cover the bank loans, cover everything, and just get out of this, because this is hard." And it was hard, and it is hard, right? But no, I'm not done, right? And I just have to, I hadn't found a way to manage my emotions and the work and the stress and the strain, and while still enjoying a pint, and I'd stopped enjoying them, to be fair, but so I wanted to get back in the trenches. I wanted to, it took a while. I didn't go out in the industry for about 3 months. I didn't go out to events and stuff. And after the first one, I found it really, really hard. But I knew there was another way. I knew there was ways to do it. And by playing golf with clients, by going for hikes with clients, by having chats, by having more open conversations, and just challenging myself to do it a little bit differently. And yeah, I wanted to go back in the trenches, re-enlist, and say, look, we can make a difference here, because I know there's other people suffering, right? I know, and there'll be, hey, there might be another day that I suffer, you know what I mean? Right. And I need some, help and support from other people, and I think just promoting that culture of, being there for each other, to in turn be well enough and good enough and healthy enough each day to keep going on and on and on and on, and build more. I said earlier, sport, I go back to sport in a lot of things, and I love a sports analogy. And on the way over here, I was, I worked for a while, and then I was watching a couple of the programs on the plane, and one of them was, it was Coach K. I mean, I'm a basketball guy, so Coach K talking to LeBron. I'm sure plenty of people have seen that interview, and it's about a 25-minute interview, and it's Coach K talking to LeBron. And LeBron talks about when, quite early, people, he realized he wanted to have a really long career. So he started, he said, I didn't even know why I started it when I was in high school, but he saw the pros, and there was a picture of Patrick Ewing, and you saw Patrick Ewing putting big bags of ice and taping them onto his knees. And he said, I started doing that because I thought, if these guys are doing it, then it must be worthwhile doing, and it's going to help me make my career longer. So it's the same in what we're doing. Like, we plug back in. If people see you doing something and taking time or minding yourself, then they'll start doing it. And then hopefully they'll prolong their career.
And I am embarrassed, I don't remember, it's a female college basketball coach. I think she was with North Carolina, or Duke. I forget. Coach, maybe the Coach K reference swayed me, but I'll have a link in the podcast. And she gives this speech that is one of the most inspirational, incredible speeches I have ever heard. But the big idea is good days add up. Keep working. Keep doing. Do the things. Work the pause in. Bag your knees up with ice, even if you're not sure, even if it's painful. Keep doing the work, and good days add up. And they achieve a momentum that... She didn't say this, at least I don't remember it, but the inverse of that is true. Bad days add up, right? And so we have a bad day. We have a bad moment. If you're in the industry that we love and that we participate, and you see your friends, I just mean what you've said many times, mind the people around you. If you go into community, if you have a story and a reputation as a individual company or as an industry, that this is more true than not, whether it's the environment, it's other human beings, it's the community engagement and how you manage sound or whatever the things are. If that is an industry is your story, people are attracted to that and they want to be part of that. And I'm so glad that you were vulnerable and I get an opportunity and other other people, and I'm sure we'll derive more to it. But I'm hoping that more and more blokes have conversations like this so they can pour into each other's lives so we can have the best life possible for ourselves and for the people around us while we're doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, a few times in this conversation, you have mentioned the word suicide. And, and when I think about what you're just saying there is, if we promote for people to be able to talk like this, then maybe we will in turn save more lives. There'll be more people that choose not to instead of choosing to. And I'm one of the people that, I was there, and I'm very lucky to be unsuccessful in my plight to take my own life because I did try on a couple of occasions and one very serious towards the end. And I'm very fortunate to be here. And I spoke a couple of weeks ago with a lady who runs a charity in Ireland called Chalk Tom. I sat on a panel before with her son, actually, with Robbie. And I spoke with this family, and we were talking about just, I feel as somebody who is alive today, who almost wasn't, and turned to my own choices. I owe it to other people who haven't managed to have that life. That unfortunately, that short-term decision, that long-term solution to a short-term problem, and they were successful in their plight to take their own lives. I feel like I owe it to them to live the best life I can and be the best I can be. That's not trying to be cheesy and corny. I'm not perfect.
Right.
My wife will tell you that. I'm far from perfect, right? I make mistakes. I make mistakes with my children. I make mistakes with my wife. I make mistakes in my work. But I try to learn from them every day, and I try to work on my own self and my own well-being, and forgive myself too, look in the mirror. So I think, my point is that if we can keep doing this, maybe we can support other people to talk in times that they wouldn't have. You mentioned their war, we've mentioned different things. My grandfather made a choice as a 16-year-old boy to enlist in the British Army, and he fought in World War II. And the reason was that at 15, his parents had died in a tenement fire in Glasgow. And his brothers were all younger, and they all went into the orphanages. And it was his turn. He'd been in an orphanage. It was his turn to go to the workhouse because he was 16, so he went to go to the workhouse. And he said, look, I felt safer going into the trenches and fighting in World War II than I did going into the workhouses. And, and he had, he didn't call it that then, but he had PTSD. He didn't know it. He drove ambulances in World War II, and he never drove a propelled vehicle again as long as he lived after the war. If that's not trauma,
right?
I don't know what is. But so I think, but the tools, the ability to talk wasn't there. I mean, obviously the vocal cords were there, but the knowledge of the talking therapies, that ability to utilize speech and language to share with another human how you feel, and to try and heal that pain that is your own. I don't know. I've studied counselling. I've studied addiction counselling. I still, it's very hard to see exactly what it is that talking does, but it works.
Yeah.
It really does. So I encourage people to do it.
Yeah. I completely agree. There's a phrase from the scripture that says, "A man without vision will perish." I'm sure that exists in most philosophies. If we lose hope, we hear stories of prisoners of war and all kinds of unbelievable circumstances where people maintained hope, where certainly I, and maybe many people, would have given up hope. But were those people that maintain hope in spite of all things, or every now and then they just get the universe intervenes and they're not successful in whatever their darkest moments were, and they're allowed to flourish and learn. We were talking about learning from mistakes, and when those things happen, and other people get to rally around them. And I'm a big believer. I've had to have counseling before. I've had to take medication before. And if I hadn't gone through my mental health crisis 20 years or so ago, I would have no appreciation for that fear, that hopelessness, or whatever. And I look back on it now, I'm like, what? It was a temporary thing, but the fear was so overwhelming where I got trapped in my mind. And you got to work through it. And so thank you for coming on today and being so vulnerable and having this great conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you.
Well, look, if you've enjoyed that conversation, hit the like button. And if you loved it, hit the subscribe. We'll have links down below where you can connect with Cathal on LinkedIn and learn more about Moy materials and other instances where Cathal has spoken. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.